Welcome back to Earthquakes Stadium. Charles Wollin, Joel Soria, Alex Morgan, Jamon Moore. The Quakes win back-to-back matches. A huge result tonight for them in the California Classico, the 73rd regular season edition of the California Classico. This one, let's be honest here. It had its fair share of controversial moments, a couple of penalties, some VAR decisions as well for the referee to make. But it was Andy Rios's penalty that gave the Quakes all 3 points this evening. The cars just behind us here, behind the scoreboard, very loud indeed, asking for the final whistle. There was 5 minutes of stoppage time as well. We will bring you the post-match conference of Matias Almeida and some players once we get those. But I would like to introduce the rest of our Black and Azul team and ask them for their post-match comments on this evening. Let's start with Jamon Moore.
Thank you, Charles. Yeah, it wasn't the most clean game, let's say. It started off in this really cagey affair, just like we talked about in the pre-show, the highly compressed mid-block. But the game really opened up after the Quakes got their goal. And we saw the Galaxy chase a little bit in the second half. They gave the Quakes some opportunities, and they took advantage by creating the penalty at the end to be able to secure a win.
Alex Morgan, what did you make of this performance this evening from this Quakes team? It seemed that after the Quakes scored their goal just before the halftime break and came back out of halftime, they seemed to be the aggressor, and then finally getting their goal just around 15 minutes from the final whistle, maybe 12 minutes from the final whistle.
Yeah, Charles. Honestly, it felt a little bit like deja vu. Matias Almeida stuck with the same starting 11 that beat LAFC 2-1 last weekend. He made more or less the same substitutions, and they got the same result in a very similar manner. Another comeback victory spearheaded by Shea Salinas. And I think this was well-deserved. They allowed an early goal because of a defensive lapse from Florian Youngworth, but they recovered well. I think they had the better chances. LA Galaxy really didn't show much, and this is a fully deserved victory.
Joel Soria, there were some bad results before last weekend and tonight. Let's be fair here. Beating the two LA teams for Matias Almeida, certainly a huge checks off of the list, especially against LAFC last week. And then he does have a way against this LA Galaxy team. His record is pretty superior to this LA Galaxy team. Every time he's come up against them, 3 wins, 1 loss, 1 tie. What would you say on tonight? Back-to-back wins and another 3 points.
I talked about this previous to the game on the pregame show. I talked about how crucial 3 points tonight could have been for the San Jose Earthquakes. Last week we were talking about a spirit booster with the 3 points against LAFC. Tonight it's just a game changer for the team's morale. I mean, you talk about being at rock bottom for so long and then suddenly picking up 6 points against, your Californian counterparts. That's huge. This is immense for the team. Today they played with so much tenacity, with so much passion and conviction. And that's exactly what you need from the San Jose Earthquakes in order to succeed in this Almeida system. Huge win. You can't say it enough. This is a massive 3 points for the San Jose Earthquakes, because as we know, they've leapfrogged onto the 9th position in the West and are just 1 point out of playoffs.
Yeah, there's the table right there, Joel. Just 1 point out of the playoffs. The top 8 teams make the playoffs here in the Western Conference, and they're right there. They're right knocking on the door. Plenty of games left to play. Let's talk about the match-winning sequence. It seemed like the Quakes were building up. They were the aggressor in the second half, and Shea Salinas wins a penalty here, Alex.
Yeah, look, Shea was the difference maker tonight. Shea Salinas gets the job done. He's 34 years old. He's not the flashiest or most technically gifted player. He hasn't been assistant starter since, I think, 2015, but he's just so damn effective. He's, especially as a substitute, his pace and his direct eye for goal are really dangerous and really productive. And he has a knack for showing up in big moments. Everybody remembers that epic game winner he scored in the Classico in 2017. He scored against Vancouver in stoppage time, and MLS is back. Last weekend, he scored against LAFC, and this time he won the penalty for which Rios scored the winner. Look, we all know that Chris Wondolowski deserves a statue when he retires, but honestly, I think the Quakes should make it a monument. I think they should make it a monument and put Shea Salinas right up there with him because he deserves it.
Let's start and talk a little bit about the back line. And I want to talk about the goalkeeper position. There's been so much discussed about this goalkeeper position. JT Marcinkowski, 2 starts in a row for the young goalkeeper. And Jamon, you showed some charts prior to the game, some good data of statistics and distribution out of the back, and then also an unchanged back 4 that seemed to kind of get through this thing somewhat unscathed, but of course there's going to be plenty of knocks and plenty of sequences, pushing and shoving that we saw, and lots of intense challenges, flying into tackles, etc. But Jamon, back to you on the defensive side of things. Let's talk about the goalkeeper. Let's talk about this back line.
Yeah, it's still a little bit early in some ways to be able to fully grade JT Marcinkowski. We've had 3 games, but in those 3 games, what we've seen is a lot fewer shots being taken against him so far, and a distribution that's significantly better than something that Daniel Vega was providing previously, at least since MLS is back. And at this point, I think we want to see more to see if the correlation is there between the number of shots that he's facing versus Daniel Vega's facing in order to say that's a goalkeeper improvement? Or is it just the combination of the players that are in front of JT Marcinkowski are just working well together? You know, another combination game of Tanner Beeson and Flo Youngworth. Now, Flo, unfortunately, was at fault for the first goal. A good reason for that is because the next time that he gets a yellow card, he will be suspended. And he happens to know that this team does not have another right center back available right now. So because of that, he has to watch that situation. So normally he would pull his shoulder in that situation. He chose not to. Ended up not hurting the Quakes at the end, although at the time it was obviously not good at all for the game. But now you're seeing different things gel. The problem is the goal comes from Marcos Lopez, and that was assisted by Nick Lima. And we don't quite know what the outside back situation is going to be once Lopez departs for Peru for World Cup qualifiers. Kudos to him, very well earned. He's been, as we've said here, the biggest bright spot probably for the Quakes since MLS is back. But now the Quakes are going to have life without him. He was a star tonight. He got a fantastic goal, and he's been fantastic for the last few games. And I can't wait to see what Matias Almeida decides to do about the left back position, and does that mean Nick Lima comes back, and what does that mean about the right back position? So it's going to be really interesting. But what the Galaxy didn't let was JT Marcinkowski's feet beat them in a way that the LAFC kind of did last week. They stayed back and made him pass underneath. So it really wasn't a distribution thing, but the defense was just also well organized tonight. Whether that's Marcinkowski or whether that's the defense, combination of both, it works.
I want to talk about Marco Lopez and that stunning goal, that stunning strike. Obviously, that seems like it's definitely in his toolkit and in his tool set. And I think a lot of fans have been kind of waiting to see this left back truly emerge. And tonight, Jamon, you're absolutely correct. He's an absolute star. Joel Soria, earlier this evening, you had said he's a player that makes both Matias Almeida and Gareca, his national team coach, smile. How big of a loss is this that Lopez is going to his national team qualification matches? And also, let's talk about it on the Major League Soccer side. The league has been trying to get involved to try to block some players. In a way, it's somewhat unfair that they also had to voice up and voice their opinion to stop players from going to play for their national team. I mean, if you're a young player, don't you want to go to play for your national team, especially a national team that qualified for the last World Cup and is still a pretty good national team, a top 25 national team, one of the most up-and-coming national teams in South America?
Yeah, it's an absolute huge loss for the Quakes. Marcos Lopez getting called to the Peruvian national team. I'm convinced that no one had been working harder than Lopez ever since the team went into quarantine. I mean, he has been working in silence, tirelessly. I want to say, we talk about a 19, 20-year-old player who was being criticized by many for being somewhat poor last season. He has to put his head down, work really hard, and finally, the chances appear to him after the MLS's back tournament. Let's recall that during the MLS's back tournament, he suffered an injury, and then shortly after had appendicitis and had to go under the knife and wasn't available for Almeida then. Now he comes back integrated into the squad, and he's completely been the most positive thing that has happened to the Quakes, along with Kate Cowell. I said it a couple of weeks ago. It's a huge loss, but I totally stand with Lopez in wanting to go to Peru and represent his nation. I mean, you also have to look at it from a technical staff point of view, right? You sign players like Lopez from smaller clubs in South America for a bargain to eventually sell them off to, maybe potentially a team in Europe, or perhaps a team in Liga MX, or the Orlando City did with Yoshimar Yotun a couple of years back. So in order to get there, though, obviously Lopez has to be a consistent starter here in San Jose, which is coming to fruition. And not only that, he has to be a standout player. Well, today he delivered a world-class goal, without a doubt. And now what he needs to do is integrate himself to the national team, perform, and he'll be on the right path. It's a loss for the Quakes, absolutely. But a player his type needs to go and challenge himself, and I think he's done enough here. He's earned a spot. He can go to Peru. He can get coaching from Gareca, get a ton of experience, and bring it back. Potentially, the Quakes in the meantime will be able to hold their own and be in contention for that playoff spot.
Joel, I think it's in the short term, it's disastrous for the Quakes, because then they're going to have to shuffle around a lot of pieces to figure out what to do with that back line. But I think in the long term, it's really beneficial, because the Quakes want to be a selling club. They've talked about that, how they want to bring young players into this club and then sell them for profit. And if they're going to do that, guys like Lopez need to get international exposure. He needs to get that level of experience. And I think everybody in the organization, in the community, is proud of him. He's been really composed, really tactically disciplined, and really dangerous going forward. Obviously, that goal shows just how technically gifted he is as well. And he deserves the call-up. And as much as the Quakes are going to miss him, I think it's beneficial for all parties in the long term.
If you're just tuning in to our broadcast, this is episode number 61 of Black and Azul. We will carry post-game press conference coverage of Matias Almeida, and we just found out that Marco Lopez and Nick Lima will be also speaking tonight at the press conference. I do want to bring it to the man that did score the match-winning goal, Andy Rios. Lots of criticism, lots of discussion about him, either being in that striker role or underneath. And then he's named in the starting 11 back-to-back here and played in this number 10 position, filling in for Magnus Eriksson. That hasn't really been replaced. Jamon, how do you think that he did in that role, despite obviously putting the Quakes and giving them the 3 points tonight?
Well, let's be clear. He's not being asked to play a 10. He's not. What he's really doing here is he's playing almost like a second forward, and he's being asked to carry some defensive responsibilities that probably Magnus Eriksson would have had previously. So he's not being asked to be a conductor for the squad in the same way that Magnus Eriksson was. It's really looking almost more like a 4-4-2 or 4-2-2-2 empty bucket. You can see from our vantage point in the stadium, there's big holes in the center of the pitch, quite a bit. And players are moving in and out of those positions in order to try to keep the defense guessing as to what's going on. That's a spot that Magnus Eriksson was taken before. Congrats to Andy Rios on the penalty kick goal. I think it's good for his confidence. There were some questions, why not Christian Espinoza? But Rios, to his credit, stepped up and took it, and he looked really confident taking it. And hopefully that means that he's about to break out and be able to contribute more offensively to this side. But keep in mind, when the Quakes brought him in last year, he was known for being a defensive forward. Similar in some ways to the way Quincy Amarikwa used to be, but a different style, a more South American type style. And, we saw more of that defensiveness from Rios tonight and a lot less on the offensive side. But that's kind of expected given what I believe Matias Almeida is asking for him to do. That doesn't mean I don't think people think he's doing it really well. I just think it's not the same role that Magnus Eriksson was being asked to do previously.
Jamin, I think it's obvious, it's very evident watching that this team is still missing a number 10 to take that role. And honestly, I've not been convinced by Fierro or by Rios or by any of the players in the front line, really. I think that the attack is more or less interchangeable at this point. Espinosa is obviously the starter on the right, but I guess I'm not particularly convinced that any combination of Salinas, Fierro, Towell, or Rios is much stronger than any other at this point.
Joel, your thoughts tonight on Andy Rios scoring the winner?
Credit where credit is due. I thought Rios stepped up, executed it properly, put it in the back of the net, and you can just tell how much the goal meant to him with the celebration, right? He stood there, he fisted, he clenched his hands and just screamed at the top of his lungs. He then rushed over to Chris Wondolowski, who was very, very excited and animated to see his fellow teammate score a goal that needed to happen, honestly. As we know, Rios has been, the focal point of criticism for far too long here, and I think justifiably so. Look at his numbers. His numbers, in correlation to the amount of money he's making a year, it doesn't seem like a smart purchase. He needed it. He got it. Hopefully that will be that will spark a change in his play. I do agree with Alex. I do agree with Jamon. The team is in desperate need of a number 10. Rios is not. Prior to that goal, he really wasn't adding much to the attack whatsoever. If anything, I thought he was taking up some space. But that goal deserves credit. He put it in the back of the net, and tonight he earns the Quakes three huge points.
Let's go ahead and take a question early here. Yes, early in our set this evening, and I want to take it from Nathan Zaragoza. Good question. Is it a weakness of Almeida's system that pulls some of our attackers far out out of position to defend? We rarely get solid and consistent scoring chances like some other teams. Jamon?
Yeah, I think there definitely are some. There are some weaknesses to the type of system that Almeida is going to play. Teams are going to try to find ways to be able to do something against the system. We saw them begin to do it last year, particularly toward the end of last year, and to do it with some decent effect. And one of those things is to drag players out of position. That does create sometimes opportunities where a player is not where they ought to be. Early in the game, there was a chance where Christian Espinoza got in behind, and guess what? The players were not there to be able to support him. He was like 1v4 all on his own out there looking for a cross, and no one had been able to catch up to him because of their defensive responsibilities. So I do think there's something to it, but I also think it sometimes creates opportunities that maybe get missed. If a player is in a position that they wouldn't naturally be in, if the Quakes can win the ball and turn around and immediately attack, they're also going to put the defense on the back foot, trying to deal with the situation, which could be an overload in a particular situation or a third man run in behind. So there are opportunities to use that to the advantage. It kind of really goes both ways and depends on, the particular night. We know that there's a a bit of luck in the game of soccer. Sometimes that luck is having the right players in the right place at the right time. For tonight, at least, it felt like it went the Quakes' way to have those players in the right place, particularly in the second half.
I want to take a couple of other comments here from our commentary stream. Curious Taco says, never start Vega again. Karn Johal said, a shout out to Danielle Slayton. Great caller commentary throughout the MVP between her, Lopez, and Beeson. And now we are tuning into Matias Almeida's press conference. Stay with us, folks. Appreciate you tuning into Black and Azul. We'll be back to wrap this all up for you. Appreciate your patronage and your support.
Congratulations, Matias, on the victory tonight. It's been 2 weeks in a row, and it seems like the game plan has been pretty, or at least the way the game has unfolded has been pretty similar. How would you assess the performance and obviously getting two results, two big wins in a row? How would you assess that?
Los partidos dieron maneras similares. Este partido con ¿Cómo ves la actuación del equipo y qué sentís después de los dos resultados buenos?
Bueno, buenas noches.
Good evening.
Hoy sentimos alegría.
Today we felt joy.
Los jugadores han entregado estos dos partidos muchísimo.
The players in these last two games gave a bunch.
Están creyendo más en ellos mismos.
They're believing more in themselves.
Y por suerte, después de mucho tiempo, pudimos trabajar una semana seguida.
And then luckily, after a long time, we were able to work for a week in a row.
Creo que hoy enfrentamos un rival muy difícil.
I think today we faced a very difficult opponent.
El último partido también.
The previous game as well.
Y pudimos ser competitivos y por suerte tener victorias.
We were able to be competitive and luckily we were able to get the victories.
Thank you, Matias. I've been told my audio was not doing so well, so I hope it's better now. But let's go on to Jamon Moore.
Good evening, Coach. Congratulations on the win tonight. Can you talk a little bit about the contributions of Marcos Lopez? Obviously, he's going to the Peruvian national team for World Cup qualifiers, and this team feels like they've depended quite a bit on him more recently. Can you talk about how you're feeling about his progress right now and how this team is going to need to adjust without him? Thank you.
Sí, puedes hablar un poco de cómo se tiene que construir Marcos López. Obviamente ahora se va a la cualificatoria del Mundial con la selección de Perú. Últimamente parece que el equipo depende mucho en él. Si puedes hablar un poco de cómo ha estado con Marcos en tu partido, cómo se puede ajustar. ¿Qué ajuste tiene que hacer cuando se va con eso?
Bueno, Marcos es un joven que en estos momentos se ha adaptado a esta liga.
Marcos is a youngster who in these moments adapted himself to the league.
Como todos jóvenes lleva un tiempo.
Just like every youngster, they take time.
Y creo que las participaciones, tanto de él como la de todos los compañeros, han sido parejas y buenas.
And I think his participation along with the rest of his teammates have been even and good.
Siempre que un jugador va a una selección es una alegría para el club.
Whenever a player goes with the national team, it's a joy for the club.
Más allá de saber que quedamos con un jugador menos.
Beyond the fact that we know we're going to be with one player less.
Pero bueno, intentaremos preparar a sus compañeros para que puedan actuar de la misma manera.
But well, we'll try to get his teammates ready so they can perform in the same way.
Hi, Matias. Congrats on the victory, and thanks for speaking with us tonight. In these last couple of weeks, you guys have pressed a little less aggressively. It looks like the line of engagement is a little bit lower, and that's been successful. You've won these last two games. Do you think this more defensive setup is the best way for this team to get results going forward?
Últimos partidos el equipo presionó un poco, esperó un poco más y no aprieta tan alto como hacía anteriormente. Si este esquema un poco más defensivo, saca resultados y ves que va a seguir por ahí.
No, siempre analizamos al rival.
We always analyze the opponent.
Analizamos la energía que tienen los jugadores en sus piernas.
We analyze the energy that the players feel in their legs.
y el hecho de no haber entrenado mucho tiempo
and the fact that we didn't train much time
ha hecho que modifiquemos desde algún sector la presión.
has made us change the press in some sectors.
El equipo sigue con la misma intención.
The team still has the same intention.
El equipo de estos dos partidos tuvo intensidad
These last 2 games, the team had intensity,
y hemos trabajado en equipo.
and we've worked as a team.
Por suerte esta semana pudimos lograr entrenar una semana seguida
Fortunately, we were able to train this week, a week in a row,
y es lo único que a nosotros nos convierte en competitivos.
and that's the only thing that converts us to be competitive.
Joel Soria.
Buenas noches, Matías. Joel Soria. Obviamente, usted ha jugado el fútbol, lo ha entrenado, y a lo mejor quizás ha estado en una situación, digamos, una situación difícil como la que se vivió hace pocas semanas aquí en San José. 2 victorias contra rivales, ¿qué les da a un jugador en el tema espiritual y psicológico?
Yo creo, Joel, que es muy importante entrenar, es muy importante tenerlos todos los días, es importante que ellos crean en ellos mismos como lo están haciendo y saber que cuando están unidos, cuando están frescos de mente, son competitivos. El hecho de haber jugado tantos partidos seguidos donde hay poco recambio se hace difícil y yo cada vez que terminaba un partido se los repetía. Nosotros necesitamos trabajar, necesitamos corregir. Hay muchos jóvenes, poco espacio para entrenar y bueno, recién esta semana pudimos realizar esta semana de entrenamientos que nos beneficia, pero siempre creemos en lo que alguna vez hicimos y en lo que hacemos, más allá del resultado.
Matías, ¿cómo te va? Carlos Mauricio Ramírez de Telemundo San José. Un fuerte abrazo, ¿cómo estás?
¿Qué tal, Carlos? Un abrazo.
Profe, su equipo hoy con una semana de descanso enfrentó al Galaxy con una semana de descanso, con jugadores como Javier Hernández, como Jonathan Dos Santos, como Cristian Pavón, jugadores de selección, como Rolf Felser, que también se va a la eliminatoria, y el mismo equipo que fue criticado, hoy, profe, marcó un gol en el que 8 futbolistas tocaron la pelota, dieron 13 pases seguidos, y el lateral derecho terminó centrando para que el lateral izquierdo marcara un golazo. Cuando uno ve el dominio en condiciones iguales, ¿qué mensaje le manda al resto de la liga e internamente a ustedes?
Bueno, nosotros siempre estamos en la búsqueda de que ellos mejoren individualmente y colectivamente. Nosotros venimos buscando un estilo propio y muchas veces, obviamente, después de tantos resultados adversos, la credibilidad en muchos queda ahí. Nosotros seguimos creyendo en lo que hacemos, en lo que hicimos en algún momento, porque el jugador de fútbol no se olvida de jugar al fútbol. Puede tener momentos buenos, como también puede tener momentos malos. Lo importante fue mirarnos para adentro y sacar adelante a los jugadores mentalmente de esa situación incómoda en la cual estamos, pero bueno, creo que hemos dado 2 pasos firmes, con confianza, con una mentalidad diferente, y bueno, este es el San José que nos gusta. Pues este San José es competitivo así, pero también sabemos que ahora vienen muchas seguidillas de partidos. Tenemos hoy 21 jugadores y estamos esperando que se recuperen algunos lesionados, pero bueno, es para todos iguales y nosotros seguiremos insistiendo con nuestro juego, con descubrir jóvenes, con darle confianza y que sepan que ante la adversidad lo vamos a intentar igual.
Thank you very much, Matías. We're bringing players in soon.
Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Black and Azul episode number 61. You just heard from Matias Almeida and what he had to say this evening. He talked about Marcos Lopez, and he said Marco is a youngster in these moments. He's adapted himself to the league. When any player goes to the national team, he will be representing Peru in World Cup qualification very soon. He said, even though we'll be without, when a player goes to the national team, is a joy for the club. Even though we'll be without one player less, we'll try to get his teammates ready so he can perform in the same way. Almeida said, lucky for a long time we were able to work for a week in a row. He mentioned that multiple times in his press conference. I'm joined with the rest of the team, Joel Soria, Alex Morgan, Jamon Moore as well. All the lads here were able to ask questions to Matias Almeida. I'll start with you, Alex, on what he had to say this evening.
Well, the one thing that stood out to me, Charles, is that in every single answer, I think, every single one, he talked about the schedule, about how much time his team has to train in between games. And honestly, I think that's just a tired excuse at this point. It's really frustrating because every team is suffering from that. He says that they can only be competitive when they have time to train, but that they struggle when they don't. And I just don't buy that excuse. If it's really impossible for him to play a system without a full week of training, then he should find ways to adapt his system and to change his system like every other team's been doing. I guess it just feels like sort of a weirdly negative mindset and totally uncharacteristic for someone who's usually so dogmatic and always brings so much energy.
Yeah, what really stood out to me was a comment he made at the very end, talking about how he only has 21 players to count on at the moment. He's going to be waiting for a couple of those injured players to recuperate and finally be able to reintegrate themselves into the first team. For the meantime, he has 21 players to depend on. Perhaps we can talk about this a little later, but it's going to get that much harder for this team to have a consistent core with Danny Husen now injured for the season, Marcos Lopez, as we mentioned, joining the Peruvian national team, and you have Rocco and Guram Kasha, who are now with the Georgian national team. A couple of weeks ago, Matias was very frank, and he said that the pains and the sorrow could potentially come up again for the San Jose Earthquakes, considering the schedule, considering injuries and absences. I think it's something to monitor here, though. Despite the good position that the Quakes find themselves in at the moment, 2 victories in the last 2 games against, two rivals, the Quakes are going to be heading into another busy part of the schedule with limited arsenal, and that, can always be a big question mark.
Joel, I'm curious because that part of the press conference was in Spanish. A couple of weeks ago, after the Colorado game, he talked about his relationship with the owner and about how the owner, John Fisher, had a choice to make and sort of implied that he needed more resources to work with. Do you think that he was making more overtures at John Fisher tonight, that in mentioning how thin his squad is, he was implying that this team needs more investment?
Well, he chuckled a little bit before he said 21 players. I imagine. I don't know. I don't know how much you want to read into it. I don't know. There's a million ways of interpreting that. But the reality is that the Quakes are a little battered on a personnel end. And, the team needs to bring some new faces to San Jose. I mean, Jesse promised up to 2 signings this transfer window, and I haven't heard of anything yet. So it's tough to say whether or not the Quakes are going to refresh the roster anytime soon. They need to do it, though. That's for sure.
And just to clarify, this transfer window ends on October 29th, I believe. It was delayed because of the COVID crisis. So he has some time within the month, those transfers he promised.
But this team right now doesn't even have a backup right center back. I mean, with Guram Kasha gone, you would have to take a left-footed center back, someone who's only really being asked to play a left center back position, and be able to put them at right center back. So, it's you're either that or you're going to be starting very young homegrown players. So right now you've got a situation where Flo Youngworth is afraid to go in hard into a tackle or pull a shoulder, and a goal results from that. The team's going to have to find some ways to reinforce quickly, whether that's from Reno or whether from inside the league. Use this transfer window. I think this is a great time to look inside the league for a transfer. This is the right time to be able to do something like that, because the league would find someone who can come in and be able to contribute pretty quickly if they're already in the league. We know that's not Jesse Fiorinelli's MO, but that's the situation that we find ourselves in right now. This team is going to be kind of desperate. They need that right center back. They need a 10, and they really need another 9, because right now it's just Andy Rios and Chris Wondolowski. And so we saw Cade Cowell get a cameo there tonight. Maybe he'll get more time there. I'm not sure that Almeida feels like that's his best position, but he's running out of options right now.
Yeah, Jamon, we were talking. Oh, it looks like we have Nick Lima here.
I'm using Alex's computer here. But congratulations on the 3 points. We can jump right into questions. So let's start with Joel Soria.
Hey, Nick, good evening. Congrats on the three points. I'm going to make this pretty simple, but I mean, back-to-back wins against, Californian rivals. What does this second win mean? I mean, you guys leapfrogged about 2-3 teams in the table, and now you guys are sitting one outside of the playoff spot.
It shows that we're doing something right. We need to keep doing what we've done in the past couple of weeks. When we hit the bottom there, we took a look in the mirror, and we had a good conversation together. By no means are we out of it. There's a long way to go, but we took a step in the right direction. And we have some tough games coming up, but we got to keep going on the same path and keep bringing the energy every night. It's not going to be easy, and I'm sure there's going to be times when we go through struggles again, but we've shown that we can come out of it, so now we just have to be consistent.
Thank you, Nick. Let's go to Carlos Ramirez.
Hi, Nick. Carlos Ramirez, Telemundo Bay Area, NBC Bay Area. How's it going?
Going, Carlos.
Nick, beyond the obvious, which is more rest and more time to practice, Matias has emphasized a lot about the importance of having a week to prepare for each game. Like I said, beyond the obvious, which is rest and preparation, what's the biggest difference that time makes for this team to be competitive, having a week to prepare?
We get in, we work just little intricacies of each team and how we're going to press and going over it and making mistakes in practice before we get out on the field. Our system may seem simple with it being man-to-man, but there are things that require high-paced change and being just proactive when teams have the ball, other teams in our press, so we don't get beat and give up goals like we have before, such as Seattle game or something like that. But every team's going to be having short weeks now too. So we have to go and just bring energy each time. It's going to be hard, but I think as long as we bring the energy from an entire squad of 18, we should be able to have some success.
Thank you, Nick. Let's go to Alex Morgan.
Hi, Nick. Very shortly, Marcos Lopez will be leaving to play for the Peruvian national team, and that will leave the left back spot open. Do you see yourself taking that spot, or would you prefer to continue playing on the right, which is your more natural position? How do you just see that playing out?
I'll play where I'm put, kind of where the team needs me. That's kind of been my role for the past couple of years. So if it's the left, it's the left. I prefer the right, but it's a time where, like I said, 18 guys are gonna have to step up, and that includes myself if it's moving sides.
Thank you, Nick. Let's go to Alicia Rodriguez.
Thank you. Congrats on the win tonight, Nick. You mentioned earlier that you guys had a talk, when things were going pretty bad. Was this something that was kind of led by the players? Was this, with management? Was this led by Matthias? Like, can you take us, to an extent behind the scenes and, kind of explain what happened in the talk that perhaps turned things around for you guys?
We've had both. I wouldn't count it to one moment exactly. I count it to a couple days leading up to a game, not playing the role of a victim. We went down to LAFC knowing that it was going to be a tough game, but we went and played freely. We emphasized that. We emphasized togetherness, work rate, just kind of the simple things what you can control. And we made that front and center, and then we have a goal. At the time, we had to solidify something that we're all achieving. I think getting into a playoff spot is what that is right now. And we go out there each game at a time, but with that in the back of our minds that we're trying to get there.
Thank you, Nick. Let's take 2 more questions. The first one is going to come from Dylan Butler at MLSsoccer.com. He wants to ask you the significance of winning late in the last 2 games.
You sleep well. You get an energy high at the end, and then you crash a little bit when time comes. No, it's good. It builds momentum, and I think we're going to need that. It now becomes a short week pretty consistently here till the end. I think we'll get a little bit of a break for a couple of days. So having that momentum going in tomorrow, getting a good recovery session, and just keeping that fresh, what we did, and just continuing to build on it each game. That's what we have to do. We can't forget it, but we also can't just back on that solely. We have to go forward.
All right, and the last question will go to Jamon Moore.
Hey, Nick, congratulations on the win. My question for you is about your partnership with JT. You guys have been together for quite some time in this squad, and you played in front of him in 2018 where he got to have a few starts. What is it that you've seen about JT in the last 2 years and what you've seen in these 3 games that he started that he's grown in the most, you would say, in the last couple of years, that puts him in a position of bringing a lot of confidence to that back line because you guys are winning games with him back there right now?
Sure. I'm not going to speak on the recent years. I've seen him actually play growing up with his older brother, and the first time I saw him, he was working on the sidelines. He does the same thing in the locker room every day since the time he came in. When he was signed, he puts in the extra work. He has a good head on his shoulders, and he's a great teammate. He's a great locker room guy, great roommate. He always gives his best, and he's shown that he'll be ready. A couple years back, I think wasn't the best of times. He got thrown into the fire, but he did well. He kept his composure. I think he learned a lot, and he stayed ready for now an opportunity that has come again for him. He's done phenomenal, and he's a player that I think is going to go far, and he has a huge career in front of him.
All right. Thank you very much, Nick, and congratulations again on the victory.
Welcome back, everybody, to episode 61 of Black and Azul. There you have Nick Lima, the Quakes right back. Alex actually asked if he prefers left back. He said, I'll play where I'm playing. I play where the team needs me. If it's left, it's left. If it's right, it's right. He also talked about, even though the system is simple, there's lots of intricacies as well that they go over. He also showed, he talked about how they're winning games at the last moment and how the energy was high again, then you crash again. It continues to build. We're going to have a short week, and it'll be pretty consistent with those short weeks until the end. He was asked also about what the deal was with the LAFC game and going into that and what they identified. And he said, the team is not playing the role of a victim. We emphasize togetherness, the way we can kind of control the game. We solidify something we're all achieving, and getting into a playoff spot is that something right now. Joel, what do you make of his comments this evening? And we're about to hear from Marco Lopez, I'm being told, so we'll hop in there once we get that.
Well, it's a Nick Lima who is obviously in a different mindset now. You know, he talks about being able to sleep at night following these 2 victories. He talks about being the team player, willing to adapt, willing to play the role that is given to him. You can obviously sense that there's a difference now mentally within these San Jose Earthquakes players, and it's good to hear because we've talked about this time and time again. But in order for this system to be effective, the players need to be 100% bought into the plan. They need to completely trust the manager, and the manager vice versa, right? Needs to also completely trust his players, and even the players within the field have to trust one another as well, and they have to be willing to give it all when they take the field. And I think we're starting to see that with these players. They're preaching patience, they're preaching grit and tenacity and fighting spirit that was so far removed from this team just a couple of weeks ago. So on that end, I think that the words today from Lima are definitely on a much more positive tone.
And I think it's particularly important when you're talking about Nick Lima as well, that buy-in, because he's been someone who's been shuffled around the back line throughout Almeida's tenure in San Jose. He wasn't an immediate starter. He wasn't an immediate favorite of Matias Almeida. So to see him now starting on that right side and playing strongly has been good. I actually think he had a quietly strong game tonight. I think both of San Jose's goals came from Nick Lima's crosses from right to left. There's a far post cross from Marcos Lopez for that first goal, and then Shea's penalty was also a diagonal ball from Nick Lima across the box. So the question now is where he will play going forward with Marcos Lopez gone, because in the past, he's been the guy who fills in at left back there, even though he is not as comfortable there and prefers playing on the right. He's made that abundantly clear to us in the past. So it's unclear if we'll be able to continue to build on this momentum at that left back position.
Jamon, before you jump in here, there's some questions here about Tanner Beeson potentially slotting in. And to Alex's point about that left back and maybe having to move over to that left back spot, Tanner Beeson has played left back at Stanford. He also played it at SF City FC last season in USL 2. Back to Alex's point about maybe shuffling around, it's quite clear that Nick Lima will be in the 11, whether he's at right back or at left back.
Yeah, and one of the things that we saw from Tanner tonight was he was getting toward the sideline quite a bit, and he was attempting some of those straight progressive passes that we've seen Marcos Lopez do. So I'm certainly very open to the opportunity of checking out Tanner Beeson at a left back position and allowing Alanis to step back in at left center back and to give it a go, because Nick Lima right now on the right back spot, Almeida hasn't been starting him every game, and that might be a fitness question. But now that they've had that week, hopefully we can continue to see Nick Lima getting more time at right back. He definitely is a shutdown type player. He thrives in the opportunity to take on someone like Christian Pavone. That's what he wants, is that challenge. And he's going to have an opportunity now to help get this team back into a playoff spot. They're only 1 point out of a playoff spot. Who would have thought that 2 games ago? And particularly, they get down a goal in these games, they found a way to fight back and be able to get a win. Nick Lima is absolutely a bright spot tonight. You know that the social team is going to have that gift going where he was spinning around and getting around players and controlling the ball and passing out. And that was a really great moment, but it was just emblematic of how hard Nick Lima was working throughout the game tonight. Again, I look at him as like the shutdown corner in the NFL. He's a shutdown outside back for the San Jose Earthquakes. He showed it from his very first game in the league, going up against Nacho Piatti and shut him down. I just think he thrives in these kinds of situations. I'd hate to see him move from the right back position. If the team can accomplish that with Tanner Beeson at left back, I'm all for it. I'm open to any options. But right now, this team is fighting for a playoff spot. So long as it doesn't jeopardize that, let's try something.
And the one moment that stood out for me from Nick Lima tonight was an absolutely crunching tackle he had on Joe Corona that was near the touchline. And that was the moment that sparked a bunch of shoving and fisticuffs between the two teams. I think Joe Corona slapped him on the back of the head afterwards. And I think he was very lucky to get away with a yellow card. It could have easily been red. And then, of course, you see Chris Wondolowski going at it with Chicharito, Jackson Ewell getting a yellow card for getting in players' faces. And that was the moment where the sort of tension sparked and flashed in that game. And I think that energy, I think the energy that Nick Lima brought to the team in that moment was one of the things that propelled them towards the victory tonight.
There's a comment in here about the pitch. And I want to bring it up because there was a little bit of chatter in our area here. For those of you that are tuning in, it's Joel, Alex, Jamon, and I up here in section 113. We kind of are socially distant, of course, 6, 7, 8, maybe even 10 feet away from each other up here on this wonderful area of the stadium, and appreciate the PR team of the Quakes for allowing us to do our show from this specific position. It's really a quite neat position, but I got to bring up the pitch. And Thomas Boggs wrote, how can our pitch be so poor? Quite embarrassing. And there was some other chatter about the pitch. We've seen some slippages on this pitch before. How much of a factor really is it? I'm not really someone that usually brings this topic up when talking about a game or a match, especially a game that kind of goes toe-to-toe, especially a derby match. But let's see if we can answer this question.
Well, there were yellow cards that should have been assigned to the pitch tonight that had to be assigned to players because you can't give one to the pitch. There was several of those situations where players were making contact that I don't think that they normally would have. We know that this pitch has always been very slippery because of the way that the air sits in the stadium. You can see it behind us here. Some of that is an air quality issue, yes, but some of that is just the way that the cool air tends to sit in the stadium, and they water it down, and it does make it slippery. But tonight was a different kind of situation. And I do think that this is something that the team is going to have to live with for the rest of the season. But you can see out there, I don't know if you guys can see it from the angle, but there are spots of light and things out there. And there were a lot of footing issues. They seem to be worse this year. But we say it every year. It's like playing at the Shark Stadium. It's very slippery. The Quakes players are used to it. They feel like it's a home field advantage for them. They wear special, deeper spikes that allow them to be able to grip. And a lot of the times the opponents don't have those. They don't come in with those. And this was the case even over at Buckshaw back in the day. It's just something that's part of the Bay Area. And so it's something that they're going to have to look at and see what can they do in the off season to get this pitch back to the way it was, at least when the stadium, opened. I think it's time for some investment on it for sure.
Yeah, I'm not a turf management expert, but I'm pretty sure that the Quakes could use better groundskeepers. I mean, I'm sure they work their tail off, but time and time again, the field is too soggy. And as you were mentioning, Jamon, the opposing players don't come in with soft ground cleats, so they tend to slip on and off throughout the 90 minutes. Tonight, I saw a couple of Galaxy players slipping towards the end of the match, more so than, in the first half. Chicharito struggled a whole lot a couple of weeks ago. Today, it was a little different for him. And I keep mentioning Galaxy players because, as you mentioned, Jamon, Quakes players are used to it. They've adapted. As you said, they kind of use it to their advantage. Surely something needs to be done about it. I don't know if anything's actually going to be implemented because, as we know, the biggest problem when it comes to playing surface in MLS is the fact that you still have a handful of teams that play on turf. Sure, if you want to argue turf is better than this, go for it. I'm not going to spend my time on that. I still would rather, I'm sure 9 out of 10 players would tell you that playing on natural surface, regardless of its condition, is much better than turf. But that's that. It needs to change, but I doubt it will.
I mean, I think the Quakes use it to their advantage, but it's also a safety issue. The Quakes have suffered, numerous injuries. 3 of their center backs are out at a time a couple weeks ago, and you have to wonder whether that's in the pitch or muscular injuries because slipping and sliding on the pitch. It's definitely a safety concern for Matias Almeida's team at this point.
We're going to be joined by Marco Lopez in just a minute. RG said, yo, Jamon Moore, that was actually hella informative. Thanks. And then above that, Jesus Rojas says, nothing compares to the Buck Shaw pitch. And just a little note about the Buck Shaw pitch. Yeah, that was really informative, Jamon. I actually didn't know that they played with some deeper studs, and they thought of it in that realm. And, you know, in the last couple games, I just got to say, maybe a little Goonies magic potentially back in the mix here in San Jose. The spirit kind of is there. And, you know, Alex and Joel, and I can hear an echo, and I don't know who needs to mute, but, and sorry, I love my team, but I just got to say it. We talked about the spirit. Let's come back to the spirit. Let's talk about the energy. The spirit and the energy is there for this team. Nick Lima just referred to that. We'll hear from Lopez, and we already heard from Matias Almeida, but the spirit and the energy and the passion is there.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, and sometimes, you know, if this is another sport, sometimes that comes through a manager change. In football, American football, it can come through a quarterback change. This quarterback is not giving you the performance you need. You need to change the quarterback. It sometimes is for no reason other than it provides some new life. And I do believe that the change to JT Marcinkowski has brought a bit of that to this team. You know, they could have, after several bad losses, decided to cut ties with Matias Almeida, or Matias Almeida could have walked. They didn't do that. But Matias now has taken the opportunity to take a young goalkeeper, someone who he still calls a youngster, although I have some issue with that, and he has given him the opportunity, and now you have back-to-back wins. I have to believe that so long as the team is winning, JT Marcinkowski is going to continue to get the opportunity. Vancouver at home on Wednesday seems like a great opportunity for another win for this team. If they can get that going and you get 3 in a row, now you're potentially in the playoffs. They're only 1 point out right now. You know, now anything can happen. And like I said before, you wouldn't have thought a couple games ago that we'd be talking playoffs at this point, but here we are.
Yeah, I was actually, now that you mentioned the schedule, Jamon, I was actually taking a look at it. You know, you play Whitecaps this Wednesday, and then you play them again in a couple of weeks. You also play the Galaxy and RSL. I think those 4 games are must-wins for this team if they want to make playoffs. Outside of that, they're going to be playing the Timbers a couple of times, if I'm not mistaken, as well as the Sounders and LAFC. Those are tougher draws. Sure, if you squeak out a win in one of those, then you're definitely going to be in contention for that number 8. But those 4 games that I mentioned, those, especially the 2 games against Vancouver, must be wins for this team if they really do want to make playoffs this season.
Yeah, I think we've got a little bit of the schedule in front of us. Jason's going to throw that up in just a second once we get that. It is Vancouver on Wednesday, 7:30 p.m. kickoff, and then a week from tomorrow it's at Portland, and then 10 days from today it's in LA, and then back here against Seattle midweek. And then against Vancouver away, but that game will be in Portland, and then RSL at home that Jamon just referred to, and LAFC at home, and then wrapping up away in Seattle as well. And it looks like we got the schedule right in front of you guys here, so we want you guys to see it. There it is. Take a look. We're still waiting to hear from Marco Lopez as well. So stand by with us here on Black and Azul. Give us a thumbs up if you like our show. You can give us a thumbs down if you don't like our show too. That is okay. Any feedback is good feedback. We have said that from the beginning, right, Joel Soria? And make sure that you subscribe. We're trying to grow our subscription numbers. We're trying to grow our subscriber numbers. It is important to us. Tell a friend, tell an aunt, tell a grandma, tell an uncle, tell a cousin, tell a brother or sister. You know, make a new Gmail account for your newborn, you never know when they're going to need their new Gmail account or not. But anyway, we appreciate your patronage very much. Again, we are Black and Azul, giving you pre and post game live analysis here with the press conferences. Occasionally, we will throw on a little bit of a player interview or two, or a coach interview or two. We want to do more of those as well. I'm just getting some word here that we're going to the presser very, very soon. So I appreciate everybody for hanging in there with us here on Black and Azul as they're teeing up the press conference here with Marco Lopez.
Looks like we're not quite ready with that, Charles, but looking forward to it.
Can we talk about
again? We talked about this.
Can we talk about the Chicharito and Wando scuffle? Is it not time for
Yeah,
that?
absolutely, Joel. While we're waiting for him, why don't you go ahead and get into that?
I'm going to toss it to Alex.
All right. Well. Here is my take. And right as I want to deliver my take, we are running right to the press conference with Mark.
Hola, Marcos. Felicidades. All right. Thanks, everyone, for your patience. So we are now joined by defender Marcos Lopez, and we will have a translator for all questions that come in English. So let's go ahead and start with Alex Morgan.
Hi, Marcos. Congratulations on the win and congratulations on your goal. How special was this moment for you to score your first goal for the club? What does it mean for you?
Tan especial
Thank you. Para mí significa mucho, ya que lo deseaba hace mucho tiempo.
Me, it means a lot because I've been looking for it, desiring it for a long time now.
Creo que me agarra en un buen momento. Estoy paso a paso creciendo como jugador y estoy feliz por el gol y por la victoria del equipo más que todo.
I think I find it in a good time professionally. I think I'm growing as a professional as well, and it makes me glad for myself and for the team.
Agradecido con Dios por esta oportunidad y agradecido con el grupo porque siempre se entrega al máximo.
Grateful for God for the opportunity, and as well as the team for always giving it their all.
Thank you, Marcos. Let's go to Jamon Moore.
Hi, Marcos. Thank you for taking the time. Congratulations on the goal and on the win, but also congratulations on being named to the Peruvian national team for the first two games of World Cup qualifying. Can you talk about how important this is going to be for you as a professional to get to participate with the senior team in World Cup qualifying? And also, how long has it been since you've been in Peru and gotten to see your family? And what does it mean to have the opportunity to be able to go back there at this time?
Gracias por la victoria, pero también por tu convocatoria a la selección. Platica un poco más sobre lo que representa para ti y el hecho de que tengas un buen ritmo y vayas a poder jugar y regresar a la selección, y el hecho de regresar a tu país, que significa para ti cuando tú puedes.
Gracias. Siempre uno como futbolista quiere ser llamado a su selección, prepararse de la mejor manera en su club para recibir eso en una convocatoria, un presente, un futuro con la selección.
Thank you. Everyone as a football player wants to be called up to their national team, so it's always something good to be able to get called up and represent your own country.
Como dije antes, creo que estoy pasando por un buen momento aquí en San José. Eso me da felicidad, tranquilidad y confianza para lo que viene a futuro. Ahora me toca ir a mi selección.
Like I said before, it's always nice to be able to get called up, and I think I'm going through a really good time right now in San Jose, and it gives me tranquility and happiness to be able to be where I am today.
Entonces eso me da mucha felicidad, como ya lo dije, de pertenecer a un grupo de seleccionados, uno como jugador se siente muy feliz, siente que está haciendo las cosas bien y hay que seguir por este camino. Ahora que voy a la selección trataré de hacer lo que vengo haciendo aquí en San José, de poder ganarme un puesto y tratar de poder jugar uno que otro partido en estos dos fechas que tocan.
Like I said before, very happy for everything that's happened, happy with the team, happy with San Jose, and now that I'm going to go to the national team, I'm looking forward to doing my best and be ready when I come back to San Jose with this club for the rest of the season.
Thank you, Marcos. Let's go to Alicia Rodriguez.
Thank you. Marcos, I wanted to ask you, recently Matias said that he thought that you were now finally pretty comfortable here in the United States and playing in MLS. And he thought it showed in your game. I'm curious from your perspective if you feel similarly, if you feel like in your second season here you feel more comfortable and feel like you kind of understand how playing in MLS works now, and how you would rate your game, I guess, at this point in your career.
Hace rato hablaron con Matías y Matías dijo que te sentías un poco más cómodo viviendo acá, ahora en tu segundo año. Ella te pregunta si es cierto, si te sientes de la misma manera y cómo te sientes en lo físico, pero también en lo emocional.
Sí, creo que un jugador cuando sale de su país lleva un proceso de adaptación para poder adaptarse al país que llega. Siento que esa etapa la he pasado.
Yes, I think any soccer football player that goes to a different country takes a while to adapt. I think that was my case.
Entonces, eso se ve reflejado en la confianza que me da el director técnico, el staff, los compañeros y la confianza que tengo hoy en día para poder jugar, para darle confianza al equipo, el poder llegar al área y tratar de rematar al arco. Creo que todo eso el año pasado me costaba un poco y en la parte defensiva siento que he crecido como jugador con respecto al año pasado.
And I'm overcoming that phase, and I think that's thanks to the coaching staff, to the staff in general, to the club, and I'm feeling a lot more comfortable as I go through the season. And again, I feel very happy and a lot more adapted to everything as we go on.
Y agradecer al equipo porque hace que cada uno se vea mejor dentro del campo, porque creo que esto es de todos, los que juegan, los que están en el banco, los que no les toca salir en lista. Creo que todos somos un equipo y eso Matías trata de implementar, ¿no? Estoy feliz y quiero ir por más.
And that adaptability has allowed me to feel better on the pitch, look for spaces, look for crosses up in the front part, and I'm just very happy with the team, with everyone as a team, for all my teammates, on the ones on the pitch, the ones on the bench, everyone shows that we're a family, and I'm just looking forward to improving as we go on.
Thank you, Marcos. This question comes from Dylan Butler with MLSsoccer.com. To come from behind and score late to win, especially in a Clásico, what does that do for the team moving forward?
Es el hecho de ir perdiendo y luego darle vuelta al partido y ganarlo, clásico como es este. Se siente el equipo, ¿qué ánimos le da?
Primero que todo, sabemos que los clásicos se tienen que ganar.
More than anything, we all know that all derbies must be won.
El gol nos tomó, digamos, de sorpresa porque fue muy rápido, pero sabíamos que con el control de juego, pasando los minutos, podríamos crear nuestras posibilidades mediante el control, mediante la profundidad que tenemos. Eso se vio reflejado en el penal que adquirimos. Lástima no lo pudimos concretar, y después vino mi gol mediante la insistencia que tuvimos.
And the first goal caught us a little off guard, but we tried to come back into the game, maintain possession, create chances, and we saw that as on the penalty kick that unfortunately we weren't able to score on. Then I was able to score my shot, tie the game, and then the last goal at the end helped us out.
Creo que nunca dejamos de intentar, siempre fuimos para adelante. Como repito, la actitud que tiene este equipo es espectacular. Nunca baja los brazos, más allá de que vayamos 1-2-0 en contra. Estoy feliz también por este momento que estamos superando.
And I think that this team never loses hope. We're always striving. We're always creating chances. And ultimately, we saw that today. I'm just very glad and happy with everyone tonight. I'm happy in the moment that I'm going through right now with this club.
Pero, bien es cierto, no veníamos en un buen momento. Sabíamos que no estábamos muertos, que nos podíamos levantar, que podíamos seguir, y este equipo tiene grandes cosas para darle a esta liga, para competir y para dar sorpresas.
And I'm very happy because we're going over this bad streak that we were in a couple weeks ago. Tonight shows it. We just keep fighting hard, and I think this team has a lot to give to the league, to everyone watching, and we're just looking forward to keeping on that momentum and doing our best as we go on.
All right, we're going to take two more questions directly in Spanish without a translator. So let's go to Joel Soria first.
Buenas noches, Marcos. Joel Soria, desde San José. Sé que no todo ha sido flores para ti desde que llegaste. Sé que el primer año lo sufriste, debido a la adaptación, obviamente, dejar tu familia, dejar Perú. Y este segundo año, obviamente, los primeros partidos no estabas en los planes de Almeida, luego se vino el torneo y tuviste la operación de la apendicitis, pero te llegó la buena racha al tiempo adecuado, yo creo, ¿no? Me gustaría saber si tuviste conversaciones con Ricardo Gareca durante esa etapa difícil. Y también me gustaría saber de que cómo recibiste la llamada a la selección. Gracias.
Buenas noches. Sí, fue muy difícil el primer año aquí para mí. Como sabrán, ya lo dije, el proceso de adaptación para un futbolista que sale de su país creo que es algo complejo. Tengo familia aquí, y uno como futbolista siempre necesita el respaldo de su familia, de tener a los suyos cerca. Eso fue un papel importante para el futbolista, pero tuve que lidiar con eso, ¿no? Me esforcé. El primer año fue muy duro. Jugué, si bien es cierto, varios partidos, pero no al nivel que yo puedo brindar a San José. Entonces, tuve momentos malos, como momentos buenos, y este año creo que me adapté al nivel físico de la liga, al juego, a lo que quiere Matías. Creo que jugar con Matías es lindo jugar, pero requiere un sacrificio enorme, y creo que el grupo lo entendió también. Estamos felices por eso. Y sí, hoy en día estoy muy feliz, estoy con confianza, vengo haciendo las cosas bien, gracias a Dios hoy pude anotar y eso anímicamente, quieras o no, te levanta, te da un plus para seguir, para saber que estás haciendo las cosas bien. Agradecido con el grupo porque siempre está ahí apoyando y en los malos momentos siempre estuvo ahí y ahora que las cosas va marchando bien en el tema individual, estoy feliz y hay que seguir por el camino del sacrificio, de la actitud positiva, del meter ganas. Con respecto a lo de la selección, no pude hablar con Ricardo hasta ahora. Seguro hablaré cuando llegue a Perú. Obviamente me pone feliz. Como lo dije, un jugador de fútbol siempre quiere representar a su selección. Yo estoy feliz por poder representar a mi selección. Ojalá me puedan dar la posibilidad de jugar, pero yo me voy a entregar al máximo en cada entrenamiento para que me vean que tengo ganas y que puedo brindar lo poco que tengo hacia el grupo, ¿no? Y nada, feliz, feliz por el momento que estoy viviendo, feliz por el grupo, que es una felicidad enorme poder lograr una victoria y ver caras felices en el camerín. Entonces, eso como futbolista y como compañero dentro de un grupo te hace muy feliz.
Thank you, Marcos. We have one last question in Spanish from Carlos Ramirez.
Hola Marcos, ¿cómo te va? Carlos Mauricio Ramírez de Telemundo, un fuerte abrazo.
Hola Carlos, buenas noches.
Bien. Oye Marcos, Nilson Loyola se desgarró en el partido con Cristal, lo desconvocaron. Miguel Trauco no juega desde el 1 de marzo del 2020, al día de hoy tiene 7 meses y 3 días que no juega con su club, el Saint-Étienne. Llegas a la convocatoria de Perú como el lateral izquierdo más en forma de la franja. ¿Sientes que esas dos realidades de Loyola y de Trauco te abren la puerta para al menos uno de los dos partidos contra Paraguay y Brasil, tal vez los dos, ser titular en este momento en tu carrera y cómo estás llegando? Gracias.
Buenas noches, nadie quiere que un compañero se lesione. Espero se recupere pronto Nilson. Con respecto a Miguel, creo que es un gran jugador, tiene grandes condiciones, si bien es cierto no viene jugando en el Saint-Étienne, pero en la selección sabemos su calidad que tiene para jugar. Entonces, viene siendo el jugador titular en la selección. Yo vengo aquí en San José jugando, teniendo continuidad, lo vengo haciendo bien. Como te dije, yo espero poder jugar. Tengo la confianza y sé que tengo la capacidad para poder jugar. Me voy a entregar al máximo, como siempre lo hago en cada entrenamiento, para que el profe vea que tengo ganas y tengo posibilidades de poder jugar, ¿no? Más allá de eso, no podré decir si juego o no. Al final, la palabra final la tiene Ricardo. Obviamente quiero jugar porque siempre quiero jugar, porque me entreno bien, porque tengo ganas, porque siempre quiero estar dentro del campo, pero de donde me toque voy a apoyar. Vengo en un buen momento, feliz por eso. Voy a llegar con las mejores energías para darle al grupo. Hay grandes jugadores en la selección y ahora toca Paraguay-Brasil, dos duros rivales. Ojalá me toque jugar en uno de los dos partidos y si es en los dos, mejor.
All right. Thank you very much, Marcos. Congratulations on the victory. And thank you all for joining us.
Thanks, everybody, for tuning into Black and Azul and sticking with us throughout the duration of the evening. A little bit of news and notes for you to wrap up on. And Marco Lopez says he's thankful, and he is thankful. And as a football player, he wants to be called up to his national team. It's always good to get called up and represent your country. He says, I'm thinking I'm going through a really happy time right now. It gives me tranquility and happiness to get where I am today. He says he's happy with the team. He's happy with San Jose. Now that he's going to his national team, he's looking to do his best. adaptation to adaptation and adapting to the league. In an MLS, he says any football player, it takes a while to adapt. That was his case, well documented. And Joel, you had asked him kind of a question about this, and he elaborated for a long time. And you and I, since we started the show, have always marked Marco Lopez as a player to watch. And finally tonight, he got that first goal for the Black and Blue, and he's really coming into his own. He really is.
Without a doubt, Charles. Tonight, Marcos was an A+ on the field and an A+ behind the microphone. He just finished what I thought was a tremendous press conference. A 20-year-old player showing this much, maturity and composure, despite the roller coaster ride that he's been on a personal level, not even keeping in mind what has happened with the team, just on a personal level. He's been up and down, swallowed and spit back out times 3. And, he comes out with so much poise tonight, drills a heck of a goal. And as I mentioned tonight, just elaborating on how happy he is, how confident he feels. And, one thing in particular that really stuck to me was that he made it clear about twice that he has so much more to offer to both the Peruvian national team and the San Jose Earthquakes, and that he knows it. The Peruvian national team is going to be going up against Paraguay and Brazil. Those are 2 tough opponents, specifically, obviously, Brazil. And he was talking about how he knows that he has the quality and the skill, to be a starter for the Peruvian national team. And that's not a small thing to say, considering that aforementioned national team is a competitive one and has players all across Europe, all across the world, really, playing for some high caliber teams. And with a coach that is, world known. Ricardo Gareca is one that has won the respect of many, many coaches, specifically in Latin America. So I thought, as I'll mention it again, a 10 out of 10 for Lopez tonight, both on and off the field. Just marvelous from the youngster.
Yeah, I agree with you, Joel, and I've always been a big fan of his, and the fact that he plays for the Peruvian national team says a lot, because there's competition for places in that national team, and that national team, when we first began our shows, I think we talked about it, but just a little bit unlucky not to get out of their group in Russia 2 years ago. They were able to get that third game, that victory, that win, but one of the most wonderful teams to follow and to watch, the Peruvian national team. I want to move on and talk a little bit about the chippiness on the field. It's a California Classico, and we had Bingham versus Wando when the penalty got called. Wando stepped up. Bingham saved the penalty. The referee went to VAR right after to see if Bingham had moved off of his line. And then later in the match, in the second half, a crunching challenge. And then we had Wando versus Chicharito. Just lots of pushing and shoving between those 2 strikers. But I want to bring up the significance of this brawl, because let's be honest here, a proper derby is going to have its scuffles. Right, Alex?
Yeah, Charles. And I actually thought it was kind of funny to see Wando and Chicharito go at it, because Chicharito was sleepwalking through most of that game. He really didn't get involved. And I think that was probably the fastest I saw him run all game, to go over and shove with Wando, the most fire he showed all game. I was actually more interested in the sort of battle between David Bingham and Chris Rondolowski, because there's a lot of history there and a history of bad blood. So they used to carpool together on the way to practice when Bingham played for the Quakes between 2011 and 2017. But then when Bingham left for the Galaxy in sort of disagreeable circumstances in 2018, that's when sort of their relationship maybe turned a little more sour. In the 2018 California Classico, Bingham also saved a penalty from Chris Rondolowski. That was actually the last penalty that Chris Rondolowski missed in Major League Soccer regular season, was also against David Bingham. So David Bingham has a history of saving penalties against Chris Rondolowski. And actually, in that circumstance, Wando converted the rebound, and there was a photo of him screaming over the top of David Bingham, standing over him and screaming at him, and that caused a little bit of bad blood. They were sort of making sniping comments about each other after that game, and so this was another riveting chapter in that rivalry and in the rivalry of the.
There was something else that
itself.
stood out to me, Alex, and that was in that same time frame. What happened with Jackson Ewell? How Jackson came in and kind of went face to face in that situation because he was unhappy with the way that his players have been treated. And one of the things that when Jackson Ewell was recently been made the captain for a couple games, people just thought he wasn't feisty enough. But we've seen the last couple games more of the feisty Jackson Ewell that does exist. And I hope we see more of that Jackson Ewell. I want to see that kind of passion and fire from him. I know he's kind of this steady player that hits ball side to side and he's cool, calm, and collected. But there's times, and this is that type of time, where it calls for more passion and it calls for more fire. We really haven't seen that type of thing from Jackson Ewell before. But I think that game-winning goal maybe brought something out of him. You saw that passion come out when he scored that goal last week, and then tonight again in that kind of situation. You want it to be a bit personal to these players, and it's great when you see someone like Jackson Ewell, who's coming into his own, who has the confidence to now get engaged in those types of situations and have his teammates' backs. Hopefully we see more of that from him.
Hard to believe that in 4 minutes you guys missed the nuts and bolts about it all. Guys, battle for the ages. Wondolowski versus Chicharito. They were holding hands at one point. That to me was literally a bit breathtaking. I mean, you talk about both players who are so passionate. It looked like they were about to go at it. It looked like Wando was about to just cock back his right hand. Then he thought about it. That to me was such a spectacle. I was about to rush down and grab some popcorn because, man, that was peak California Classico. It can't get better than that. Obviously, we don't want to promote violence here in any way, shape, or form, but we know that the real rivalries in the sport contain some sort of, let's say, physical animosity, and they got pretty close to it. I have to say, guys, I'm actually kind of shook that you guys overlook that particular sequence there.
Wow. Well, it is a California Classico. It is a California Classico, and it did have its share of controversy. Penalties were given, VAR was involved, but ultimately the San Jose Earthquakes win here. It's actually their first win at Earthquake Stadium in 2020. Mind you, their wins came at MLS's back, and they do count. But this is their first win here at Earthquake Stadium. Maybe it's the honking, maybe it's the turn of the month or the end of the month from September into October. Who knows? But let's wrap up here with final thoughts. I'll start with Jamon Moore.
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting to see the team be able to string together back-to-back wins for a change. And I think it reminds everyone what we were feeling about this team at MLS's back. That seems so long ago now, but it was just earlier this season. And now they have the opportunity with Vancouver coming here to put together 3 straight wins. And that would be a really good opportunity for this team to obviously get back in the playoff race, but really to continue this kind of surge of confidence. You have to imagine that sans Marcos Lopez, this lineup is probably going to look, again, very similar. You have to believe that Matias Almeida is going to look at that game and want to go for the jugular. He's going to want to make sure that they walk away with 3 points from a home match against Vancouver. And absolutely, right now, I would question any sort of big change to the lineup. Yeah, you are going to have to do something at the left back position. Maybe you bring in Alanis. Maybe you push Tanner Beeson out to the left. You might want to consider something different than Andy Rios. But Andy Rios takes a lot of criticism. I've criticized him quite a bit, but he also is able to go 90-plus minutes. And right now, that's something Matias Almeida needs when he's down to 21 players, as he said. He's going to need guys who can go 90-plus minutes. And right now, that's something that Andy Rios is able to do for him every single game. And that's one reason that Matias Almeida keeps putting him out there. Kudos to Andy for the confidence in stepping up and taking the penalty tonight and getting the game-winning goal. Let's hope it means that we're going to see more of the Andy Rios that we started to see at MLS is back.
All right, Alex Morgan.
Yeah, I agree with Jamon. I think it's ridiculous that we're talking about this team in the playoff race now, given how poor their September was. But that's 2020 for you. Anything is on the table. And I think this game against Vancouver midweek is a great opportunity for them to get another 3 points, because Vancouver has lost their last 3 games. They were absolutely destroyed by LAFC 5 or 6-0, I think. And the Quakes have their feet under them again. Matias Almeida made a couple tactical changes that I think have turned their fortunes around. They're now pressing a little less high up the field. Their line of engagement's lower, and that's been successful. This more defensive, counter-attacking setup has worked. And I think that mindset change has also been key in doing these late turnarounds. Their mindset is, hey, we're going to try to hold on to stay in the game as long as possible to give us a chance to nick a result late. And they've been doing that. And it's amazing to me that we're still talking about this team being in the playoff race, but with 3 points against Vancouver, anything's possible at this point.
No, it's not. Can I just quickly answer? No, it's not 2020, Alex. It's MLS. Everyone's invited to the party at the end of the season, except the really, really pathetic teams. And even though the Quakes were that pathetic team not that long ago, I did mention that eventually they would find themselves in the position where they would claw back into the 8th and 7th spot, just as they've done in the past. Guys, 8 teams out of 11? You have to be really, really bad not to make playoffs. And I want to touch on that. Perhaps the Quakes will be on the outside looking in, just like they are now, but probably in a much worse position in the coming weeks. And that's why I try to highlight those 4 games. I think those 4 games are essential. You bag both of these, in the bag, 6 points that they definitely weren't going to consider, or that they weren't considering not too long ago. Those are in. That's great. And now I think they need to go and execute against the Vancouver Whitecaps twice. And they need a win against RSL, as well as a win against potentially LAFC. But for me, really what it's going to come down to is those games against Seattle, those games against Portland. Those are the teams that they've suffered against the most. If this team can turn it around against these opponents, then I would be completely sold that they're going to make their way into the playoffs. But then again, we have to keep in mind the big number right now, 21. Almeida has 21 players to rely on, and with games, with 2 games every week, it just seems like this team is going to be in for the long haul.
And I don't want to get ahead of myself, Joel, but you just have to think, if the Quakes can get a 7th, 8th position, one of those last spots into the playoffs, they're a strong tournament team. Given how strong they played in the MLS's back tournament, you have to wonder if they can make a run. But I don't want to get ahead of myself at this point.
No, let's not do that. Charles, take it away.
No problem. I love the banter. I love the chatter, and I want to thank my teammates. Very grateful to be able to do this show from this specific position in the stadium. It's been a little bit of time since we've had the chance to be at the stadium and do this. Such a privilege, such an honor during such a very tough time in our country, a really, really, really hard time with COVID and the situation that's going on right now. Let's not forget we're in a pandemic. And so just want everybody to take a breath. You guys have gotten through 90 minutes of the California Classico and 90 minutes plus stoppage time of Black and Azul episode 61 here. So think about that for a second. We're at 94 minutes of this program this evening. The Quakes win back-to-back games for the first time in a while. Their first game here that they've won in 2020 at Earthquake Stadium. The wind is in their sails, and they're feeling an energy and a spirit right now that is somewhat palpable. We can feel it from what we see here. And Matias Almeida has found a little bit of a solution. We'll see if they're able to dig in and find some more victories, find some more points. Joel is correct, right on it with talking about scratching and clawing for that 7th spot. He said it last year in the beginning of our season 1, our first shows. He says it again. But as Alex said, let's not get ahead of ourselves. Keep tuning into Black and Azul, everyone. Just want to thank you so much for tuning into our program. We've experienced a lot of high numbers of viewership tonight. So we really want to thank you again for your support. It means a lot to us. We'll continue to say that we appreciate your support time and time again, even if it sounds like it's a broken record. And that's my first broken record reference of this year. So I only saved it for this one. Jamon Moore, Alex Morgan, Joel Soria, Aaron Sholl is our associate producer. Jason Sholl is our producer and fantastic director that puts this show together for everyone. I want to give a shout out also to Jake Pisani, who ran down to our little broadcast area, our broadcast gantry, if you will, and was able to hook up his computer right next to where Alex is standing, and they were able to kind of powwow to get the Marco Lopez press conference going on. And just wanted to thank the club for being able to allow us to have our show here and get that press conference up and live. Everybody, please stay safe. Take that extra breath. Take that extra caution. And thank you again for tuning into our program. And yes, please wear a mask.
Wear a mask.